So welcome everyone to today's peer sharing call. Today we're going to have presentations on three different youth prevention education programs. Overall highlights, and then we're going to hear from 4 different jurisdictions. 2 jurisdictions, Howard County and Worcester, are going to talk about life skills. Allegheny County is going to talk about Project Alert, and Baltimore County is going to talk about All Stars. So just a refresher of the team. Everyone, yep, that's all. And just a reminder to follow us to get any information. Before we go back one slide. I guess we didn't have like any announcements stuff, but I'll do it here and also let Helene. But just wanted to thank everyone for sharing MPOS so far. We're still collecting the MPOS survey. I think it's been about 3.5 weeks, and so we hope to run it for 6 weeks total. So it's coming along. Numbers are a little slower than previous. If you want to know how your jurisdiction's doing, just reach out and we can tell you your numbers. So you can help kind of try and use your networks to try and increase the numbers for your jurisdiction, because if your numbers are small, we won't be able to share jurisdiction level data with you. And I know a lot of you like to use the results for MPOS to track a lot of your outcome measures and also just look at overall assessment of what's happening. So the more responses, then we're able to actually share the data with you. And then also before we jump, I just wanted to quickly give the rundown. Like I said, for the call today, Rana's going to give an overview. We're going to have each of the jurisdictions share. For each jurisdiction, we can either share your slides. We have them all set, or if you'd like to share, we can obviously swap it over to you, but we have it all ready to go. And you can just say next, and Paris will gladly hit next. And then after we hear from all the jurisdictions, we're going to do 3 breakout rooms with an opportunity of just further discussion with the jurisdictions that shared. And then Baltimore County, I think we'll just have you maybe it'll be a joint discussion, but we'll have 2 life skills groups for you guys to join, and there'll be we'll want representatives from Howard and Worcester to kind of split themselves when we open up for you to select the rooms, and then we'll have further discussion around Project Alert, and we can also, if people are interested, we can then also do a further discussion with the Baltimore County team around All Stars. So when they present, people are interested, I can create that breakout room as well. Before we get started, Helene, OPHI, do you guys have any announcements?
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the peer sharing call. The only announcement I have is that you will all be receiving your FY24 award letters for the substance use block grant and OMPP by the end of next week, along with the conditions of award for FY24. That's the only thing I have.
And I guess the only thing too is, I don't know if we have any spots are left, but there's the prevention symposium if people haven't signed up for that.
Yes, we're almost at capacity for that. So if you're interested in attending, please register as soon as possible for that.
Thanks. All right, I'll turn it over to Rana.
Thanks, Nicole. So just like she said, we're going to be discussing youth prevention programs. So the first one we're starting with is Life Skills. Life Skills is a research-validated substance abuse prevention program proven to reduce the risk of alcohol, tobacco, drug abuse, and violence by targeting the major social and psychological factors that promote the initiation of substance use and other risky behaviors. This program provides adolescents and young teens with skills necessary to successfully handle challenging situations. It is proven effective at reducing tobacco, alcohol, opioid, and illicit drug use by as much as 80%. Long-term follow-up studies also show that it produces prevention effects that are durable and long-lasting. So here we've provided an example of their logic model, so you guys can look back at this if you need help building yours as well. So life skills has 3 key implementation steps. The first one is settings. So life skills should be implemented in a classroom setting in schools, the community, faith-based summer school, and after-school settings. The second one is teaching strategies. So it is taught through lecture, discussion, coaching, and practice to enhance students' self-esteem, self-confidence, ability to make decisions, and ability to resist peer and media pressure. The final one is classroom setup. So life skills program allows for flexibility to meet the needs of various classroom settings. The next program is All Stars. All Stars is a prevention program with 5 programs within it. So character, core, booster, plus, and senior, all geared towards elementary to high school age students in both classroom and community-based settings to measure students' risky behaviors. The programs are designed to work together, covering the entire lifespan of adolescent development, and it provides an engaging, student-centered, and fun approach, coupled with parent and adult integration, making it a well-enjoyed program for all ages. So this is an example of All Stars Plus logic models. They have different ones for all the different programs they provide. So All Stars is designed to change students' attitudes and behaviors. This is seen by using a pre and post-test survey that has been scientifically designed for their program. And finally, we have Project Alert. This is a free classroom-based substance abuse prevention program for 7th and 8th graders that's proven to reduce the experimental and continued use of drugs. It is most commonly administered by trained teachers in classroom settings. However, some districts have effectively adapted the curriculum for after-school programs, and outside agencies have also brought the programs to schools with strong results. Project Alert has 9 key implementation tips seen listed on the screen, and they also use a pre and post test to measure students' progress. Alert team leaders uses positive peer influence to prevent substance use. Teaching strategies include self-efficacy, active student involvement, modeling, reinforcement validation, and setting near-term goals. And parent and guardian involvement creates opportunities for parents to engage in conversations with their children about substance use. And just like the others, this is an example of their logic model for you guys to take a look back. On this slide, we have examples of process and outcome evaluation indicators. The process indicators assess dose and reach of the strategy. Outcome evaluation indicators assess changes in knowledge, attitudes, skills, and behaviors, as well as community and system level changes. You can see in the outcome evaluation indicators how the protective factors are increased for success. The number of risky behaviors in adolescents decreases due to the increase in programs. The number of positive parent-youth relationships increases, and so do all the protective factors. And finally, positive life skills increases in children due to life skills programs increasing. This shows an increase of knowledge of self-worth, confidence, and positive peer-to-peer interaction. And just like Nicole said, we have 4 presenters today, so we will begin with Howard County. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Mary Lacasse. I have with me Nicole Millette, and we are going to go through this PowerPoint. Next slide, please. And since it was so visually appealing presented the first time, we're probably going to have to skip through our first few slides. But to let you know, for us, we're doing life skills because we looked at our YRBS data and we looked at our non-fatal and fatal overdoses for those that were 19 years and younger from our police department. What contributes to this is our lack of knowledge and skills to really avoid alcohol and non-medical use of prescription drugs. Next slide. So what are our objectives for the program? Probably the same as anyone else who's doing life skills. We want to strengthen students' drug resistance skills, their social skills, their personal self-management skills, educate them on smoking, alcohol, drug myths versus realities. We do a really neat thing when we do our opioid presentations. And, we use a lot of the stuff on the internet, right? That's like real pills versus the fake ones that are going to be sold in schools. And very seldom people ever get that right? Because it looks so similar. Our relevant performance measures are, we do the course, all 8 classes. We look at the number of enrolled students. We look at the pre and post data that we collect. And then we evaluate that to measure the impact of really what the perceptions are for students. Next slide. Methods are probably the same as everybody else. We looked at the YRBS survey. Phase 2, we found a vendor to be able to provide these courses. Phase 3 was we advertised it. Phase 4, we evaluated it. Phase 5, we administered and collected the pre and post program surveys. And Phase 6 is where we recruited and enrolled students. Next. Just a visual, there's actually real people involved in this. We do 2 site visits a year. We just completed our 2nd site visit for this particular vendor and talked about the life skills classes that just ended. Unfortunately, we don't have that data yet because they're still compiling it. So we can have that at another time to share with you, but we will have some pretty good data to share. And next slide. Take it over, Nicole.
Thanks, Mary. So the findings and evaluation, so how do we determine the need for life skills training? Much like Mary said, we used data from the Howard County Police Department, and we found an increase in the percentage of those 19 years and younger that have experienced a non-fatal overdose here in Howard County, especially seeing a dramatic increase during the COVID-19 pandemic and so forth in 2021 and 2022. We also utilized the data for the data collected for the Youth Risk Behavior Survey for middle school students. So we focused on questions regarding students participating in substance use, alcohol use, and smoking. And we found that there was an increase in the percentage of students that engage in non-medical use prescription opioids between, from the 2016 survey, 2018, and then the most recent in 2021. And as we were developing our evaluation questions, we identified the items we wanted to measure. For dose, the number of life skill training courses provided per fiscal year from our vendor. For reach, the number of students that attend each course. And then for fidelity, the number of pre and post program surveys collected. Next slide, please. So how do we measure the evaluation of the program and its impact of the life skills training on students' perception of drug use and vulnerability to social influences that support drug usage? So just to kind of give a brief overview, which I believe has already been said, students are given a pre-program and post-program questionnaire in order to look at the effects of the LST program on relevant outcomes, right? So the pre-post survey examines changes in students' knowledge, attitudes and skills as a result of participating in the LST middle school program. So the questionnaire contains 4 sections. and a total of 59 questions. But what we are primarily focusing on is section C, which is the anti-substance use attitudes, and section D, the life skills assessment. And within these sections, there are certain questions that we have to analyze to receive a summary score for anti-drug attitudes and drug refusal skills that are within each of those sections. Next slide, please. So just to give, in continuation of the evaluation, I wanted to kind of provide like a visual of how we evaluated the life skills training pre and post survey. So this is from fiscal year 2022. Like Mary had said, we're still kind of in the process of fiscal year 2023 evaluation. So a bit about the questionnaire. The way we kind of viewed it was like a Likert scale, with 1 being strongly agree and 5 being strongly disagree, especially for section 3, where higher scores are preferred because it means the participants strongly disagree with the statements in the section. So you would calculate the mean for each response and compare the pre-program responses to the post-program responses to see if there are any changes. So, in other words, if there was an impact among students' perception of drug usage and drug refusal skills. So just to give an example, in section 3, or it would be section C, which is the anti-substance use attitudes, there were specific questions in there that relate to anti-drug attitudes. And so those are the questions there that you see in section 3. And one of the biggest changes that we saw is the question, is it cool? Do people that drink alcohol have more friends, right? And in the pre-program survey responses, it was a 1.81, which means a lot of the students agreed with that statement. But after the LST program, when they did the post-program survey, it dramatically, the responses had, I guess, dramatically increases, but it was in the sense of that they strongly disagreed with that statement. So that to us shows us that the LST program was a big success in that, the students felt that drinking alcohol doesn't mean that you're going to have more friends. Next slide. So for lessons learned and resources that were helpful, a resource that was really helpful was the life skills training middle school survey instructions when we were evaluating the questionnaire responses. And the reason for this is because within each section, I think I've said this before, you had to identify which specific questions to evaluate to produce an anti-drug and anti-drug refusal score. So whereas if you wanted to identify like anti-smoking attitudes, you would have to evaluate different sets of questions within that section. So that was really helpful with the evaluation and how to evaluate it correctly. A few things we hope that we can incorporate into our next life skills training is to distinguish responses by grade and by school. This would help us to see if there's a difference in the responses or changes of attitude towards anti-drug and drug refusal skills based on age, and if we need to focus our anti-drug educational efforts to a particular middle school in Howard County. So we thought that would be kind of like a lesson learned for the next time. And then some barriers and challenges when implementing the program. One of the major challenges was the recruitment retention of students. For example, the vendor would say, 20 students had enrolled, but only 15 would show up. But then at the end, only 10 students really stayed for for all 8 of the classes or for the whole course. So that was a challenge. Another barrier that we found was that some of the students, when we asked for feedback, said that the questionnaire was really, it was worded weirdly. I guess some didn't really understand the questions and things like that. So that was kind of a challenge. And then one of the major changes for the life skills was that during COVID-19, they had to shift it from in-person to virtual. And even though that was, I guess, a challenge in our eyes, it was also a positive. You can do the program online. It was easily accessible. There weren't any delays due to traffic, and there's accountability. But the problem is that if we had it in person, it it would be accountable of being an in-person group. So people would be able to show up. We would say, hey, you know, can you come in and things like that. So, but those were some of the challenges that we recognized for the life skills training. Next
Wait,
slide.
Nicole, before they
Oh,
switch to the
yes.
next slide, I wanted to add one more thing because like I said, I just had a site visit with this vendor. And it was interesting because we do both life skills and we do guiding good choices for the adults. And surprisingly, the kids don't really mind being online and being visual and being seen, and they put their cell phones down for the class. But yet the adults pushed back pretty hard about even being like engaged like we are right now on camera or to put their cell phones down. And I thought that was a very interesting dynamic. And I'm wondering sort of when
That
we
is actually crazy.
you know, go back to maybe like that in person so that people could be maybe a little more accountable. Okay,
No, that's
now
true.
next slide.
No, I appreciate it, Mary. Thank you. So the next slide, you know, will we continue to revise the program? You know, due to the increase of young students or you know, young adults engaging in substance use in Howard County, we feel that this program is still very essential. And so we do want to continue doing the life skills training courses here in Howard County. Maybe with the lessons learned that we can kind of tailor it a bit to kind of see if there is a difference in attitudes based on grade, and if we need to maybe do more focus to a specific middle school based on responses. How are you disseminating or applying your findings? We are, you know, incorporating our result. We're always kind of sharing this information within to our stakeholders and really showing that life skills is very effective, and you know, just providing our results to our OIT, I think our OFRT, and just really trying to get the word out about life skills being free and available to middle school students. And so some of the questions, I thought we had to think of questions to ask the groups. I'm not too sure if I should ask this now or if this is something that we would ask in our breakout.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I guess I could maybe leave it. I don't know. So if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, any questions for you? We really liked your questions that we're gonna have those as the breakout questions for the people for life skills. So everyone can share their thoughts with it. And we'll split you guys into both the groups so that there'll be both sites that are doing life skills to, you know, to lead the discussion. We'll be there too. But yeah, if anyone has any general questions for Howard County around how they've been implementing this program, or just any evaluation questions, how they're able to have success with that. If you have any questions, raise your hand or type it in the chat. All right, well, if anyone has anything, I'll pay attention, but we can move on to our next jurisdiction. All right, Allegheny.
Good morning. My name is Jordan Rhodes. I'm from Allegheny County Health Department, and we implemented Project Alert this last fiscal year. Honestly, I've only been in my role for a little over a year, so this was the first year that we've been able to evaluate the full year of Project Alert without having any disruptions of vacancy, or even COVID had a disruption in it. But yeah, so next slide. So just to give you a little bit of a background on it, Ron already did, but it is an evidence-based curriculum, and we chose to use it in the middle school after school program. I know that you can use it in like middle school health classes if you happen to be a teacher in that school and you want to implement that into the health class and it fits the curriculum, but we chose to do it with the after school program. It does discuss the use of alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, as well as going into depth about peer pressure and ways to say no. The full curriculum is 14 sessions. It is 13 lessons with 3 booster lessons. So what the booster lessons would be the following year, and they can take those booster lessons to kind of remind the students of what they had learned last year, if they happen to have those same students going through middle school. The curriculum and the sessions themselves are very flexible, so you can make that the schedule fit your schedule. So for example, we did with the after school program, we did 2 8-week courses. So I did 2 middle schools in the fall semester and I did 2 middle schools in the spring semester. And I condensed it down to 8 weeks instead of the 11 for each lesson. So there were some lessons that I could combine, or I found it easier to combine. I'm still getting the material across, but it also on the Project Alert website, it will give you a breakdown on how you can condense those lessons to make it easier to fit your schedule. Again, and that's also with the flexibility and being able to implement that. Next slide. How we used it in Allegheny County, we have a partnership with the Board of Ed and the after school programs for the middle school. And we did do 2 middle schools in the spring or 2 middle schools in the fall, 2 middle schools in the spring. We only have 4 in the county, so that kind of made it a little bit easier. I did do 8-week sessions, and how I kind of broke that out in those 8-week sessions. The first session, obviously kind of introduction, you kind of get a general knowledge of what the students already know about substances, and they do take a pre-test. One thing that Project Alert kind of harps on is setting ground rules, which are just like classroom rules, but you allow the students to create the ground rules, and you as well as the Project Alert teacher will have your own set of rules. And it's just nice to have a reminder for the students to be able to see every week and kind of give them guidelines on how they should act, just like they would act in a regular school setting or during the day. So the first session, you give an overview. We talk about reasons why people start to use these substances. Second session would be some consequences of using these substances. And we go into talking about what can happen in the body. And this is what can happen the first time, after using it for a little while, or long-term effects that can happen on the body. The third session, we go into alcohol, and we do the exact same thing as we did with vaping, tobacco, or marijuana. We talk about the consequences of the body and what can happen, both the first time after using it for a while and long-term effects. The whole 8 weeks, we talk about peer pressure, but we start to get really in depth about peer pressure about halfway through. And we talk about different ways to say no if they happen to be approached with using drugs, either by family, friends, cousins, anything like that. And then we do talk about resistance skills in the 5th session. 6th session, we do a lesson on opioids and heroin. I found that lesson being with the people in our county and what we could possibly be struggling with or experiencing, a lot of the students did kind of hit hard on that lesson. They had a lot of questions about that lesson, but I felt like that one was probably the most information was retained. On the 7th session, we talk about the team brain development and why it happens to be difficult to quit using these substances. And then the 8th session, we do have a review of lessons and we do take our post-test. During the whole time, I keep it very interactive. We watch a lot of videos. I pull things from the internet. I pull ads that students might see, things that they might see while they're on their phone, while they're using YouTube or social media. I try to keep it I take what Project Alert gives, and if I don't feel it's present enough, I try to make it a little bit more present to fit those students and to try to get them to think a little bit about what they're currently seeing in present day. You can go to next slide. Some of our successes, it did seem to have a positive impact on these students. And I did see after the evaluation, we're still working on our spring evaluation, but with our fall evaluation, we did see that if the students attended more Project Alert lessons, then they got a better test or better post-test score from being there more or through those 8 weeks. And then we have continued to build up our partnerships with the Board of Ed and the middle schools in the area, as well as the staff. Staff was really supportive for the most part. They never, if I needed help, or sometimes they just even offered to help pass things out, or they helped with behaviors if behavior started to get out of control in the program. So that was really helpful. You can keep the lesson structured, but you can also make sure that they are having fun and keep it intriguing. Nobody wants to, found very quickly that nobody wanted to sit there and just listen to me talk. That first lesson was a little hard, but then I made sure to turn it around and keep it interactive and keep them playing games. We did a lot of group work and all of that. Every week, I made sure to do a follow-up of what we had learned in the previous week. Sometimes I would be at the same school twice in 1 week, just depending on how the schedule fell. And if we had any weather that was prohibiting me being there for that one day. So there were some weeks where I was at the same school twice a week, but I would always follow up with what we had learned or discussed the week prior or that lesson prior. And I got a lot of good feedback on that, especially with the students that were there. We did have 82 students in the fall semester, and then we had 66 students in the spring semester, which was a pretty good turnout, especially the fall semester. And the spring semester was a little bit harder with students and how many continue to stay around, but I will discuss that in the next slide. Some of our barriers, when I'm in the after school program, I am only there for about an hour. I don't try to go over an hour. They have a kind of a schedule that they have to follow. I come right before they get fed for their dinner. And I kind of have to abide by that time. And so if we get started later, if the kids are coming in later, that cuts into my project alert time, because I still try to finish around that same time every day, unless the teacher does say you can go ahead and take an extra couple minutes, since we did take an extra couple minutes to settle down in the whenever we first came in. So I do only have about an hour to cover. Sometimes it feels like a lot of content, and to make sure that the students are really retaining what I'm trying to teach them. Some schools, when I say it had more strength with staff than others, there were some times where some schools were great with staff and helping me out, keeping behaviors in check, making sure things that were being passed out. But then there were also some schools that didn't have the strength with staff or didn't have enough staff to really cover that after school program. So there may only be one, maybe two teachers that were helping out with the after school program, and then me. And for me to try to contain all of these kids that don't really know me, the behaviors could get out of hand at times. In a way, it kind of felt like I was babysitting, but throughout the courses or the lessons, we did start to kind of create a relationship. They started to help me out a little bit more whenever they started to get more staff to come in and help with the after school program. There are other groups happening during the after school program that students do get to have a choice in participating in. With Project Alert, I try to send out a letter previously to me coming to the school for that parent to sign and for that teacher to have all of the consent forms to be able to participate in Project Alert before I even get to the school. And then they either email them to me or I just pick them up whenever I first get there. But collecting the consent forms becomes kind of hectic and crazy, especially if you have kids coming in halfway through the 8-week course. There were some students that were there one time and then they weren't there until the very last lesson, just because of things going on, or they were participating in another group. And then there were also times where kids would come in halfway through, and so they didn't get that content from that 4 weeks prior, or the 4 lessons prior. That made it kind of difficult. You don't really have a structure and to say, well, these kids didn't or these kids didn't sign a consent form, they can't participate in Project Alert, because all the kids that are there do participate in Project Alert whenever I am there. We just try to get consent forms for the students that are there, as many as we possibly can. And like I said, it's not always the same group of students every single week. Like, say for robotics, which happens to be a group, the kids that go to robotics, it is the same group every single week that go to robotics. It's not the same group for Project Alert, which becomes a barrier, because you may not have a pre-test for that person or that student, or they haven't been there for the extra lessons in the beginning. Next slide. Some future plans for us, we're going to continue to incorporate Project Alert in the next fiscal year. We are going to adjust the pre and post-test questions a little bit. As I was giving the pre and post-test questions, I was finding that some of the pre-test questions, or it's the same questions, but some of the questions didn't really cover the material that I actually covered. It may have been hit on just a little bit, but it wasn't gone into depth with. So when it came time for those kids to answer those questions, especially in the post-test, they struggled with that particular question or a couple of those questions, because we really didn't cover that material. But whenever I started Project Alert, I wasn't aware that those questions weren't going to be covered in depth through that 8-week, or those 8 lessons. I am going to sit down with the after school coordinator once we get our spring evaluation done, to discuss what we have found and try to make a little bit of changes to see if there's things that can actually help reach more students, or to be able to even have the same group of students every time that I am there for Project Alert, and collecting those consent forms better, and trying to figure out a way that we can get more of those consent forms if I am going to have students coming in like halfway through the lessons. Same thing with the Board of Ed. We are going to talk to them the same way that I talked to the coordinator, and talk about continuing to use Project Alert as the vehicle in middle schools and middle school age students. And we are also going to talk about the possibility of adding a parent component. With Project Alert, there are things that you can do with the parents, or things that you can send home, but because we are using it with the after school program isn't a grade. So things that the students take home, I have found that the things that I had sent home and asked them to share with their parents, or had to have a discussion with their parents, I don't have direct contact with the parents, so I never really know if that content does get shared with the parents. There are a few papers that I send home to get signed, and the parents know about that. I did have contact with some of the parents through email, just asking questions about Project Alert before it had even gotten started. But we would like to implement having the parents be more active with Project Alert, rather than just sending papers home and relying on the students to have a conversation with their parents on what they had learned in Project Alert. Next slide. Any questions?
I have a quick question for you, Jordan. What is in terms of, like, you were saying you guys have inconsistent like students per lesson, what percentage of the students like go to all the classes?
I'd say off the top of my head, I did have a lot of the students that it's hard because each school varies with how many students are in the after school program. Like one of my schools in the spring semester, I only had like 20 kids a part of the after school program, whereas in the fall in the after school program, I had like 45 to 50 kids signed up for the after school program in general. There were a lot that were there all the way through the 8-week lessons, and you can tell that from the post, or the comparing the pre and the post test for those students. It's the students that may have only been there for about maybe three lessons at a time, where you don't see too much of a difference unless they catch that back end, or they're there that last lesson and we have that big review of the whole 8 weeks. then they might pick up on some more content and they might get a better score. But we just don't really have control over who, or if that student comes to the after school program every time I'm there, or if they don't do another group, or we can't really prohibit them from doing another group, like a math group or a robotics group if they want to, because Project Alert isn't a mandatory thing currently.
Thanks. Any other questions from anybody on how Project Alert works or how they work with middle schoolers? All right, well, maybe we'll have some discussion in the breakout with you, Jordan. Thank you. So now I'll hand it over to Worcester.
All right, good morning. My name is Lynn. I'm the AOD Prevention Supervisor at the Worcester County Health Department. I've also got Mimi Dean, who's our Director of Prevention on the line, and Dawn Richardson, who is our after school coordinator. So I'll go ahead and get started, and then they're going to jump in if there's anything I'm missing. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this kind of has already been covered like twice, I think, so I'm not going to go through all of it. The main thing I wanted to point out here is that we do utilize the elementary, middle, and high school curriculums of life skills, and we are at 3 middle schools, 2 elementary schools, and then 1 high school in Worcester County during their free 60 period. The sessions are 45 minutes, and the curriculum is taught 1 time a week until all the modules are completed. Next slide. So these are the middle schools that we are currently in with life skills. Snow Hill Middle, Pocomoke Middle, they have a program just for girls and just for guys. They meet separately. And then Stephen Decatur Middle School, same thing, just for girls and just for guys. Next slide. And this is the other schools that we're at. So we are at Snow Hill Elementary for just for girls junior, and then Pocomoke Elementary School also just for girls junior, and then Pocomoke High School, which is new this year, for your 60 minutes. All right, next slide. Thank you. So implementation tips: develop strong relationships with after school program coordinators, develop good relationships with the youth to keep them returning to the program each week. You got to make it fun. We find offering snacks and incentives or prizes if they're behaving the way that they should behave also helps out. And then we like to have an end of year celebration. So this year we took the older kids, not elementary school, to Jolly Roger in Ocean City for the afternoon. So they could ride on all the water slides and have lunch and hang out with their friends on the last day of school. So that's also a big plus. Next slide, please. Our major successes: we have strong relationships with our schools. We have expanded to the new program at Stephen Decatur Middle School, which is the Just for Guys, and now being offered at 2 elementary schools, which is new in the past few years. Like I said, the Pocomoke High School program is relatively new. And then we did have a request to have the program at Buckingham Elementary for next school year. So that's something that we're looking at right now. Next slide, please. Lessons learned: there is a need for the curriculum to be offered for elementary, middle, and high school youth. And then as probably everybody can attest to, parent engagement events are a challenge because there's just not the participation that we would hope for among the parents, but we are still working on that as well. Next slide, please. All right, so these are our outcome measures. So I'm not going to read all of it, but it does say in fiscal year 2023, the curriculum was facilitated in 7 after school programs. And then during the free 60 period at Pocomoke High School, a total of 129 elementary and middle school youth participated in the curriculum and completed both the entrance and exit survey. So those that completed the survey, 93% were much more likely to not drink alcohol. 98% were much more likely to not smoke cigarettes or cigar products. 95% were much more likely to make decisions to not use tobacco products. 95% were much more likely to not use electronic vapor products. 90% were much more likely to make decisions to not use marijuana. And 86% were much more likely to not take prescription pain medicine without a doctor's prescription or differently than how a doctor told them to use it. Next slide, please. Thank you. These, I'll just let you read these on your own, but these are just some testimonials that were provided to us that we decided to share some quotes from actual students. We could probably go to the next slide. And then barriers. So anytime there's a change in school administration, so a principal or the after school administrator, and we need to kind of meet them and know who we need to talk to schedule our after school programs, that's going to be a barrier. And then just like everybody else has mentioned, COVID was a barrier. We weren't able to get into the school obviously for a while, so we tried to do everything online. It didn't work really well. We did have some participation, and then there was a period where we weren't allowed to go back into school once the kids were back, so we missed out on those years. And then now we're all back to normal, so everything's back in person. So next slide, please. And then this is the contact information for our coordinator. So Kelsey Kangla is our elementary school program coordinator. And then Dawn, who's on the call, is our middle school and high school with the Your 60 program coordinator. And then my contact info. Mimi and Dawn, do you want to, did I forget anything?
No, nope. I think it was a good job. We shared, you had asked about how do we share the results of what we're doing with our Drug and Alcohol Council for Worcester County. Every year there is a banquet that is held to kind of acknowledge those that are doing great work in the field of prevention and treatment, as well as enforcement in our county. And this year, as part of that, we made a handout that had a QR code that would take the reader to a website that lists all of our programs for drug and alcohol prevention, as well as our outcomes this year. So we had over 32 people attend that event, and then they were able, I think actually 100% of the people scanned that QR code and went to the website and saw that information, which is great. So I think that that's certainly something to celebrate. And part of that is talking about the after school, the life skills. So they do a great job. You know, Dawn has a wonderful reputation, as well as Kelsey, with the after school students, a lot of bonding. The kids love those two. There's a mom of one of the children that's in one of the elementary school programs that was devastated because her daughter was put on the wait list for one of the programs because we didn't have enough room for the children. So definitely kids want it, parents want it. It does great in our county. And that's really because of Dawn and Kelsey and the relationships that they fostered with the students and the administration. So we are grateful.
That's all we have unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you. You mentioned, we had I guess a question for everyone that's gone so far. But Lynn, you mentioned you guys offer some sort of incentives. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so it depends on the program. So like, you know, the little kids in elementary school, if they're behaving properly, they get like stickers for their water bottles, or they get like animal erasers or animal pens. And then the older kids, sometimes they like those things, but then they can get notebooks, or they can get like shorts or basketballs, depending on how the day went.
Great. And for any of the other jurisdictions so far, do you guys offer any incentives, Allegheny or Howard County?
In Howard County, we are currently not offering some incentives. We had in the past, like, you know, little gift cards to like the Target to buy something, but this last round we did not.
Great, thanks.
I will give students incentives throughout the course every like now and then, but they don't know about it. Like we don't present it ahead of time. And then at the very end or the last lesson, I will give them like a Chick-fil-A gift card for completing the 8-week course.
Thank you. All right, so next we have Baltimore County. They're just going to share some information with us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashima Parkinson. I'm from Baltimore County Department of Health. Due to time constraints, so we didn't get a chance to get our slides approved. So I'll just do a brief overview. about All Stars. So All Stars Character Education is a innovative science-based prevention program that promotes pro-social behaviors and attitudes. It is designed to prevent or delay early onsets of risky behaviors associated with alcohol and other drug use. The program is intended for 4th or 5th graders. All Stars Character Education is consisted of 14 fun and engaging activities. And there's a closing celebration also towards the end that families can participate in and see how, kids have done and what they've learned throughout the program. So All Stars has, it's based upon 6 character words that's discussed and explored throughout the program. The 6 character words are caring, forgiving, helpful, honest, respectful, and responsible. The main focus for All Stars Character Education is to strengthen students' motivation to avoid precursors behaviors. It is to establish positive norms, promote bonding to positive peers and positive adults. So our funding for this fiscal year, we had 2 organizations that applied. We had up to where we could do a funding for 3 groups. So we had 2 organizations that applied. One did 2 programs and one conducted 1 group. So altogether we did 3. We gave them an amount of $14.50 to implement the program based upon having 10 eligible students per group. One of the things is for the organizations to do, they had to complete and submit proof of them doing the leaders training, which is a 3-hour self-paced training. They did recruitment and they had to show proof of how they did the recruitment to recruit in 4th and 5th graders. Those are students, again, ages 9 through 11. In the beginning, they conducted a pre-test, and at the end, they do a post-test. Some of the things that they get throughout the funding, they had to buy the student materials from All Stars. That's the organization itself. The leaders get their training from KNS, and they got 2 weeks to complete that 3-hour self-paced training. Baltimore County will conduct sites visits to ensure that the program was done with fidelity. Some of the other things the organizations had to do was turn in signing sheets as proof to show that they're conducting a program and to see if kids are actually attending the program. One of our organization is called Baltimore Association of Nepalese in America. They go by BANA, and it's a nonprofit organization working for a broad welfare of the community to help Nepalese Americans throughout Baltimore and throughout the state. They also participate in National Prevention Week. I'll do a share screen because I think I could show you guys this. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, but we see all of us.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't think you shared it yet. Yeah,
is it sharing or no?
not yet.
No. Did I hit share screen? Hold on.
There we go.
There you go. Okay.
Oh,
So this was where they participated. This is from the kids in BANA. They participated in National Prevention Week. This was just a little short photo of some of the things they've done. This is their celebration that they did towards the end. See, their families showed up to celebrate, and the kids also had a chance to talk about what they've learned throughout the program. I'll try to see if I can share that also. This was them getting ready for the celebration. Let's see if I can find it there. And here's a student now sharing about what they've learned throughout the program.
The slideshow is not
Yeah,
moving.
nothing. Thank you.
Nothing?
Nothing.
Not moving. I think you need to put on presentation mode.
Hold on.
There you go.
Can you see? Okay.
Yes.
Are you hearing it now?
No.
Not hearing it?
No audio.
You need to share the sound. If you go to the three little dots, you're gonna see share the sound on the Zoom.
Improve your behavior
Can
and
you
how
hear
you
it now?
act. And I feel like it's
Yes,
a good
yes.
thing to
Okay, I'll start
learn
over.
those
Sorry.
words, because when you're older, you might not know how to like be nice to people and how to like act.
Okay,
Um,
there you go.
so what we learned in All Star is 6 character words, which is caring, respectful, forgiving, responsible, honest, and helpful. And those character words are supposed to like help you through life to like improve your behavior and how you act. And I feel like it's a good thing to learn those words, because when you're older, you might not know how to like be nice to people and how to like act. And I think it's a good thing to learn these words. So thank you.
Okay. Can you guys hear me now still?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for helping with that. The second group is Tidemark Innovation Services. Tidemark is a outpatient mental health facility that provides individual and group counseling for family therapy and psychiatric rehabilitation services. Tidemark does have a relationship with Deep Creek Elementary School. So they partnered with us, and they have access to students again in that age group, 4th and 5th graders. A lot of their students that they give service to, they struggle with like social behaviors and other behavioral issues. So we thought that, you know, All Stars would be a good fit for them. All Stars also help to build social skills for the students and teaches them how to express themselves like positively. Some of the pros with All Stars would be, it's a short, the activities are very short to be implemented, and it can be introduced to an existing program or curriculum that's already existing. The activities are between 20 to 40 minutes long. So you can do about 2 activities in one sitting. Some of the barriers for All Stars would be like the funding amount that each organization receives, the transportation to and from centers. That would be especially for like Banner, because they don't already have the kids, you know, all the time. So to get them to and from. Also by doing in person versus like virtual activities, and they feel like it's easier to do in person because when the kids are there, they're more engaged and they can have them to do things together. When they're doing it virtual, everybody's kind of easily distracted with other things in their surrounding. As far for Baltimore County, I think one of the barriers for us would be scheduling. So because of how long things take to get approved, by the time we get the funding and get the program up and running, the program will probably start maybe February-ish or even later. And then it goes all the way to the end of the school year. And towards the end of the school year, I think like kids get so much more restless, and a lot of them, their attendance tend to kind of go down and stuff like that. So it's just harder to keep them, especially if 5th graders are leaving school a little bit earlier because they graduate and stuff like that, and the program is still going on. So that would be some of the barriers for us. Anyone have any questions?
Shima, can I add a couple of things?
Yes, Rhonda.
Hi. Just want y'all to understand our history with All Stars and why we're now doing All Stars character education. for a number of years back in the, I don't know, the
Pre-COVID.
teens, yeah, pre-COVID, we did All Stars Core. And All Stars Core is actually for sixth grade students. We were sixth and seventh graders. It has a focus on like your positive future and everything, and what would potentially derail you. That program does introduce some things about substances, whereas All Stars Character Education does not. It does not specifically talk about substance use. Um, it's about the precursors to substance use. The reason that we switched was, for a long time we were working with our PAL centers, and we don't have, like in our middle schools, like specific after school programs. We had gone into the PAL centers, which sounds like maybe Allegheny's after school program, where it's a drop-in center and you couldn't guarantee the same kids on a week to week basis. We had switched because a lot of the PAL centers were near elementary schools, and out of the requests of the leaders, they were saying it was more difficult getting the middle school kids to participate than some of the kids with elementary. So we looked at that, and in a shift to try and move prevention earlier, we started looking at All Stars Character Education. We found that it's a good program. We found these community partners. Even though one is a behavioral health provider, they are doing a prevention program at their own, for their own, they decided to do that. It wasn't that we forced them or anything. With the funding, we tried doing a grant program. That was more complicated. We found now an easier mechanism within our county to do it. And so it opened up that opportunity to bring in more community organizations. We're really glad that BANA is on board. And it's a benefit of doing All Stars because that program in itself, the program creators, we've been able to go back and forth with them saying what is necessary, what is optional in order to maintain fidelity for the program. With the pre and post, we can purchase their pre and post, and they will evaluate it for us and give us that information. But it's been a good relationship with All Stars. One thing that we're hoping is that a group of the fourth and fifth graders will then be able to move forward into a All Stars core for that sixth grade, move forward to a booster, move forward to a senior. We're looking at being able to continue to offer like the continuum. Right now, All Stars Character Education is definitely, I'd say, meeting the needs that we have, but we want to be able to expand that. So that's all I had to say. And Ashima had a wonderful experience of doing it virtually online herself. And then we were able to work with the vendors that we now have. So thank you. Thanks, Shima.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Baltimore. All right, so now I'm going to open up breakout rooms, and like I discussed at the beginning, we're going to have it sort of for further discussion within each of the specific types of programs. So if there's multiple people from a jurisdiction, please spread yourself to learn more and ask further questions. And I'm sure the discussion will be relevant not just to these programs, but also any other outreach programs that you also are implemented in your jurisdictions. So I'm going to go ahead and open the rooms for those that are part of Howard, Worcester, Allegheny, and Baltimore, I actually already assigned you to your room, so you should move there. If that doesn't happen, I'll make sure to allow that. And thanks to Howard County, we have 2 great questions for the life skills breakout rooms. So that hopefully will help you guys as well to get feedback from everyone. And we'll just be there to support, to facilitate, but we're hoping that the jurisdictions that share will kind of help lead that discussion since it'll help everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and open those rooms. So you guys select the room to join. If not, I'll just start assigning you.
How do we select the room, Nicole? Sorry, I'm not seeing how to
Do you not
select.
see the breakout room?
No, where do I?
Yes, I can see either.
Oh, I see, down at the, okay, yep.
If you can't see it, I can assign people. If you don't care, I'll just send you to some rooms.
I'll try to pop in there, Nicole.
Someone has their hand raised.
I do. What is it? They're on a call.
Yeah. Do you have a preference? You can unmute yourself. I can assign you.
You can just assign me at random.
Okay.
All right, let me go to All Stars really quick.
I need to go to, oh, you go to Project Alert, Michelle. That was because I don't have anyone else unless I go there.
No, I am going to go to
Nicole,
Project Alert, but I'm going to go to All Stars really quick.
Okay.
And then I'll pop over to Project Alert.
Nicole, it's Pat. I'm on the phone. Can
Okay.
you assign me anywhere? Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm. All right, so hopefully everyone was able to have some discussion with, answer some questions. So I guess we can go through and share the thoughts, and then, but before we start, we had a question that we wanted to pose that came up in our group that we were curious about, kind of from everyone in general before we do the specifics. And it was around sort of how at each jurisdiction, sort of how after school programs sort of work.
Hey, hey. Oh, I got something for you.
Rondalyn, here we go.
People.
I don't know if that was bad. So the interest of how is after school programs, are they sort of offered universally? Like when people refer to like after school, is it like working with with the school systems? Is it offered through partnering with like organizations? How does it sort of work in each of your jurisdictions? Like, do they exist kind of universally? If some people can maybe like touch on that, and then we can jump into the actual discussions. That was just a thing that what people were curious about, of how that works and across the state when people say after school programs. Yeah, go ahead. That's you, right, on the phone? Or is your hand? All right, maybe not. Jordan, go ahead.
In Allegheny County, after school is offered in both elementary and middle schools. We particularly don't go into the elementary schools for after school program, but we do go into the middle schools. The after school program is completely voluntary. So if they want to participate in it, there are papers their parents have to sign and like give information as far as who to contact, all that kind of stuff. But they sign a paper saying they want to participate in it. I do believe our after school programs, each middle school only takes 50 kids signing up for the after school program. And they make sure that those kids are actually going to show up and participate in the after school program itself before they say they have 50 kids signed up, but some kids only signed up because their friends did. Like, are you actually going to come, or can we have another student come in that actually needs the after school program because they don't have somebody to pick them up, or they don't have somebody to get them off the bus, or they don't have any kind of care after school? A lot of the time it is for kids that don't have anywhere to go after school, or people to watch them until their parents get home.
Great. All right. Thank you. So I'm gonna, if anyone else has some ideas, if you want to just add that in the chat, and then so we have enough time to then kind of go over the questions. But that was something that Baltimore County was curious. So if you have any information you want to share in the chat, that so everyone you can make sure to get that to everyone of how that works in your jurisdiction. But I think we'll start with, we had the two life skills groups, so we can kind of go over those main questions that Howard County posed around outreach for recruitment and retention, and then suggestions for improvement of the curriculum in general. So Nicole, did you get anything that you wanted to share? Or?
Sorry. Actually, I got some really, really great suggestions from a lot of people. I think that one of the biggest things that I got back was that to go to the back to school events at some of the middle schools and things like that, just to kind of promote life skills, because as of right now, at least from what I'm aware of, the only way that I think they're advertising life skills is through their newsletter, where they kind of send it in a big listserv. So if you want to like subscribe to their newsletter, that, and then their social media platforms as well. And so I had asked, like, what are some other ways we can kind of outreach to kind of get parents to have their kids enroll in the life skills. And so really going to back to school events are very, very helpful. I think kind of outreaching some of the communities as well. I believe, kind of going to the Y or like the boy, the girls and boys, after school clubs and things like that. So that was really helpful. And then one of the bigger things that we talked about for improving the curriculum is that cultural aspect of it. We did get some feedback from students about how some of the wording was really challenging, and I didn't know whether the wording was challenging was like another way of saying, if there was like a language barrier, things like that, especially since, Howard County is so diverse. How do we tailor this program to kind of meet those types of, cultural demands and things like that, and to maybe even translate it and stuff like that. So just some things I've gotten from that, and just kind of look into it and get feedback from parents, or, maybe even from the students. And I think that's it, I believe. It was a lot of great information. I wrote it down on my sticky notes, so I wanted to make sure I wrote it all. So
I do have a follow-up question for you guys, and I guess so right now, since the recruitment is sort of just out there, but you guys talked about, certain maybe there's certain middle schools that might be more of a need. Is that something that you guys are thinking of doing more targeted recruitment in terms of, like, have you looked at the demographics of who's signing up and who you're reaching, if those are like the population that most you'd want to reach?
Looking at a couple things, I think, and I know my name says Nicole, but I'm Mary. I'm the other Nicole. Like I said, we're waiting for our data for this most recent set, because I think there's a couple things going on. I mean, I heard some really great stuff, Nicole, in our Nicole
Yeah.
that was along the same lines. It was almost like verbatim. It's like, well, we translate, or we found that like the language barrier is hard. People tend to go through the survey prior to make sure the kids understand, which is really a neat idea, right? But they're also in person, which we're not. But back to the demographics, I think that like Nicole had said in our presentation, we're looking at a couple things. We want to break it down by age group. What's the difference between a 6th grader and an 8th grader? What 7th grader? What's the difference between schools that we're looking at? And then comparing that to the data we collect, because what we do is we look at what we consider risk areas, where do we have more overdoses and fatal and non-fatal overdoses? What's that rate, and what is that frequency, and where are those areas? Then where are the schools within those areas? Because I think that overlapping those two will help us have a more definitive focus on what we do in the fall.
And bringing it to Worcester, so for Lynn, have you guys had any feedback in terms of understanding? I know that you guys are in person, but have you made any adjustments to the curriculum?
No, and I was saying that during our breakout session, that I haven't heard anything from Dawn or Kelsey with there being a language barrier or having the surveys being hard for the kids to understand. We haven't had that issue.
No, and that's because throughout the whole session, the whole 8 weeks, we go over. So we go over the survey questions just to make sure that they get a good understanding. Or if we're on a session, we'll go back to, so in that case, how would you answer, number 8, from what we've learned in the last session that we went over. So throughout the whole 8 weeks, we'll go over that and just keep that going.
Do you think also, I know that we were working with like Carol kind of developed a questionnaire, and I think sometimes almost like those double negative questions can be sometimes hard to interpret, because like how you were saying, it's really like the positive is really a negative, and so just it's even like maybe explaining like what this question's really asking you, because it's that trick of how it's worded.
And Nicole S., you have a hand up, but I can't read a name. It's only a phone number.
Yeah, I think I see that, and it was Pat, and I don't know if that was from before. I don't know if she wants to say anything. I asked again. Pat, are you? Yeah.
No, it was from before.
Do you have any questions, or do you like to share anything?
I was wanting to comment on like how we get into schools in Prince George's County. A lot of times it's very similar to Allegheny. A lot of times it's a voluntary after school program and they invite us there. Or we get invited by partnerships that they have with the community or faith-based organizations, and they see a need in a program that we're doing, and that's how we get involved in the schools. I just wanted to share that.
Great, thanks. So we can talk to the project. Well, Jordan, you kind of spoke, but I don't know. Michelle, is there anything from that group that you wanted to highlight, or?
Yeah, I'll let Jordan go ahead.
Okay.
What all would you like me to highlight on?
I guess just give any additional tips that you feel like you may have received. I think we had a little bit of discussion about well, I mean, you had some independent discussion, but you had some good questions about the consent forms and clarifications about getting the consent. And now you have come to clarification about getting the consent up front and about what you're going to be doing moving forward in the next year. So maybe you just want to clarify that. And then also getting the teachers a little bit more on board, not so much about them doing the lessons, but about, just your knowing that getting them a little bit more involved and helping you getting through that 1 hour session. It is key for you to have them as a partner is helpful in that partnership in that 1 hour, because you are only there once a week in getting that key lesson in for that, because it is only an 8-week session, right? 8 sessions for that programming. So I don't know if you just want to highlight any of those key things just really quick.
Yeah. So with the consent forms, what I had ran into is I try to send them at least like 2 to 3 weeks before I'm actually showing up to the school for that very first initial lesson. That way I have as many of them as I possibly can. And we use those consent forms so we can evaluate their pre and post tests. So their parents know that we will be taking data from what they learned over those 8-week courses. If they never turn in a consent form, then we can't really technically use their pre and post tests. So say if I have 45 kids, but only 30 of them have actually turned in a consent form, those 15 we're not really going to use. But I had ran in with consent form issues with me emailing the school coordinator itself, not the overall coordinator, but the school coordinator. Some of them I would have to email multiple times in order to make sure that they got the consent form so they could print it out and hand it out to the students. And then there was an instance where I emailed the school coordinator for the after school program, and I emailed them several times, but by the time I still hadn't heard anything by the time I showed up, and I found out that coordinator was actually out on leave for the last several weeks and was going to continue to be on leave. So, but I was unaware of that, and the other staff that were helping with the after school program, nobody was really put in charge to take over the consent forms and getting them signed. So I wasn't able to actually hand them out until the very first day. Now, the first couple of lessons, if I have new students continuing to come into the after school program or being there while Project Alert is in session, I will continue to hand out the consent forms and trying to have them get them back to me as fast as they possibly can. I do tell them if they bring it back the next day, the school or the staff, they know to just hold on to them until I do come back for my next lesson. But I am only there once a week. And that is just a schedule with the after school program that they have came up with, because there are other people that do come in and teach the kids or give them lessons, or they take them on field trips, and just there's so much more going on in the after school program. So the kids are never just sitting there doing nothing. They almost every single day they have something to do, or if they don't have anything to do, they utilize that time to get their homework done, or maybe retake a test if they need to, or finish something kind of assignment that they needed to get done during the day. So it's never, me being there once a week is really all that we can do at this point, because Project Alert is also not the only thing that I do in my job or in my role. I do a lot of other different things. So once a week is about all the time that we can even spare or like give up to be able to go to the after school program. We had talked about possibly whenever we do meet with the after school program coordinator for all of the schools and the Board of Ed, we know that there are papers that have to be sent home at the beginning of the school year, one of them being the paper for the after school program for the student to be able to actually participate in that program. We had talked about possibly sending home, if they would allow us to send home the consent form for Project Alert at that time. So they would get both the after school program paperback that their parent had signed, and they would also get back the participation form or the consent form for Project Alert. That way we have them ahead of time and we don't have to kind of scramble to get them right before I start or even while I am teaching. With the 1 hour time limit, a lot of it has to do with behaviors and staff participation or staff help. It is the after school program, and it is after school by the time I get there at 3 o'clock, 3:15 every day, or when I'm there. Sometimes the students are just done. So trying to get their attention for another hour out of the day, it can be a little difficult. But a lot of the staff are very helpful with that, and they I try to keep it very intriguing. I try to keep them. I also do have incentives, like I offer them incentives, and if they're paying attention or answering questions or just doing a really good job that lesson, I will incentivize them for participating. But that also plays a big role with staff, and if they're actually helping, or if they're just kind of sitting back doing what they need to do to finish out their day. That's when it becomes an issue. And there have been several times where I actually have to stop my lesson several times, just to kind of get us all reeled back in on the same page. We kind of give like a general overview of our ground rules, which one of them is always respect, and kind of reviewing those. But if I ever have to do that, that does take away time from the time that I have to teach my lesson. But that's also with how many staff are actually there to help. Some schools definitely outnumber others as far as staff help. And some schools are just a little bit more difficult with behaviors and students in general. And just kind of depends on the day. Every day varies. But that's kind of where we're at right now. We do continue we want to try to implement and improve some of the things that we have learned this past year into next year to see how that goes. We're hoping that we just continue to improve with it, and our evaluations, they just keep continuing to improve with that as well. I did get a question about, even though Project Alert is technically 11 sessions and 3 boosters, the boosters are usually used for the following year, to kind of review what you had done in that 8-week course or however long you decide to do it. You're reviewing what you have learned and trying to gauge if the students retained any information or kind of a starting point for where you need to go. But a lot of the time you have a lot of 6th graders that are in the after school program. You have some 7th graders. You might have a handful of 8th graders, but a lot of the time 8th graders don't really participate in the after school program. So if you can get to the 8th graders while they're in 6th or 7th grade, by the time that they are getting ready to go into high school, if they have had Project Alert 2 times because they've done the after school program, then hopefully they retain some of that information. But with that, you never really know if you're going to need the booster lessons or not. If you have some of the students that you had in the previous year, but you have a decent amount of them, I will try to incorporate those 3 booster lessons into the first couple lessons that I will teach. But also if I incorporate too much of that booster lesson or too much of those booster lessons in general, that's going to condense how much content or the time that I will have with that 8-week course. Unfortunately, it's all about the time restraint, and I only get an hour because of how the after school program is scheduled out. And it doesn't matter if I come before their dinner or if I come afterwards, I would still only have an hour because of where that dinner is actually scheduled.
Thank you. We can see if there's any other questions. I know I can let, in the last group when we were talking about the All-Stars, just real quick, I can let Rondalyn talk, but a quick overview. I think with their new approach of working with some of these community organizations, that's really, it's like a side note, but it's expanded some of their partnerships and reach to different, people to work with in the community and building those new partnerships, and reaching, like I said, different, student populations. And then Ronaldin did mention that they have, through the process of this fiscal year, that next year it will be a smoother process, because they had to make adjustments of how they allocated the funds. Is that correct, Ronaldin? Like you had one idea and then you ended up doing it slightly differently. So that was one of the big barriers. So hopefully now that won't be a delay in getting things started.
Correct. We can, at the very beginning of our fiscal year, be working on recruiting our partners. We can start to put together, once we have an approved budget, but, we can start to put out the notice of funding and work on recruiting more partners and everything. And as Ashima said, there's already new people identified that weren't able to participate in this year. And so, yeah, the mechanism that we have to use now is really good. So I have a question that is not related to All Stars. It's related to life skills. Because University of Maryland Extension, we have here in Baltimore County, and they used to be cooperative extension, but 4-H and all that. And so one thing that I met the lady and we like do a networking group together, but had an opportunity to really meet her and talk about some of the detailed things they're doing. And one thing was Botvin's. And I was like, really? So they're working with it. I've also gotten some emails from our mental health team about trainings that have been offered for Botvins and strengthening families. I don't know if it was the 10 to 14, but like the mental health side is looking at these programs because there are shared risk and protective factors. And so just wondering if any of you like work together with your extension services or with your mental health teams to plan out the prevention strategies that you carry out or the way that it's implemented, because they might be doing it somewhere and you might be
Leveraging some
doing it.
resources.
Yeah, and coming together to work on it together. So if anyone has comment. And with there being none, I hope if that is news to you, it was definitely, I'm like, oh, you see something here, you see something there, and kind of being able to put it together. So that's it.
Thanks, Rondalyn. Well, if anyone is working with some of their, within other, departments or however it works in your health department or other organizations that maybe might be more maybe mental health versus substance use, that's what we always say, or even just identifying any organization that sort of just works with youth sometimes is the way to go. They might be implementing these types of programs as well, just out of their organizations. And those are great partners. If anyone doesn't have any other questions,
Well, I had a question that I asked to the Howard County. Was there any from the other jurisdiction? Was there any strategy to utilize students' feedback to to increase the recruitment? Like how were they using the students' feedback to increase their recruitment strategies?
So we haven't really asked students for, how to kind of recruit or retain them in the life skills training, which is a good point, because I think that would actually be helpful. But I believe it was Lynn that had provided some examples when she was doing her presentation, where, they would provide stickers and, maybe at the end of the session, if you've completed it all, that, they went to Jolly Rogers and all that. I don't know what we would do here at Howard County, but something maybe not as equivalent and great as that, but something good. But I remember you asking that question. I apologize for not answering.
No, my question is actually to the other jurisdiction, not to.
Oh, okay.
That's fine. That's okay. Yeah, I was just wondering if students' feedback were helping to increase the participation of other students in the life skill training programs. So like students' feedback, students who are actually participating on this life skill trainings, they have their own feedback. So if that feedback was used to increase recruitment of other students, yeah.
Was that a question for us? I'm sorry, I'm still not clear.
Yeah, for the other
I guess,
jurisdictions, for
Lynn,
Baltimore, for Allegheny, yes.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I think in our case, yeah, they definitely, if they are enjoying the program, then they're gonna bring their friends. So that definitely helps. We don't, we don't do anything with that. That would be word of mouth kind of advertising, I guess.
something to think about, just that's part of your in a way process evaluation, just helping to assess what's working to then make those adjustments. But all right, well, if anyone has any other questions for anyone that shared today, obviously there is the Google group email that everyone can always utilize to ask questions to everyone part of prevention. Latiqua she put it in our chat when we were in the breakout, so I don't know if everyone can see it, but we can pop it in again. But also you'll get the presentations and you have the contact information for everyone that presented today. So if you have further questions for any of our jurisdictions, we'd like to thank Howard County, Allegheny, Worcester, and Baltimore County for sharing with everyone today. So thank you for that.